Can you hear me okay with this now? Okay, I'm notorious for bringing it up here, not turning and putting it on. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Clyde, one of the Dharma leaders at IMC Charlotte. We have, let's look at we have 19 people online and what, 20 or so people here. So that's our Sangha for tonight. Well, tonight I'm going to kind of follow up a little bit about what we did last week. Larry talked about intentions and resolutions and renunciation. And this time of the year, that's a good time for us to talk about that. So I'm going to be talking about what I call foundational intentions. And these are intentions that we can set. And it's from the standpoint of sometimes at the beginning of the year, we have new people come and they want to start learning insight meditation, and we think that's incredible. And so, but you want to do something now, and meditation is a lifelong journey, and to be able to sit and meditate and concentrate takes a lot of practice. So we're going to look at some intentions. What are the things you can do now? And I'm going to call them foundational intentions because they're based on the teachings of the Buddha and the foundations that we have. Now, if you're an experienced meditator, which a lot of people in here are, this is also a time for you to reflect upon these intentions. If these are foundational intentions, reflect back. Am I living in accordance with these intentions? The Buddha, so what we do is we start out, I'm going to start out and I'm going to start out with the basics. The Buddha taught suffering and end of suffering. And he did this through through the Four Noble Truths. And I just want to take a moment to say that I just have a problem with the word truths, because the truth, everybody has a truth. You have your truth, I have my truth, and there's a lot of blood has been spread over, over truths. So sometimes I'll call it the Four Noble Hypotheses or theorems of possibilities. But I did look up the word truth just to see. And it said truth is conformity with reality. And I thought that was interesting because in Vipassana meditation or insight meditation, that's what we're doing. We're meditating so we can see things as they really are. What is their reality? What is that? And I thought that was just a neat thing to say, that truth is, this is what we're doing. We're seeing what is this reality what is real. So I'm going to just go these real quickly. There is the first noble truth. There is suffering, stress, dissatisfaction in our lives. The second one, there's a cause of this suffering, stress, and dissatisfaction, and that is clinging or craving or attachment. The third noble truth is that there is a remedy, or there's a way out. There's a sensation to this out of this suffering that we have, and the way out of the craving. And this is the way out is through the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'm going to go over the Noble Eightfold Path just real quickly. We're going to be looking at it deeper, but I just want to give the whole thing just to complete the picture. There's right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And I'm not going to be talking about the last three tonight, because that's mind training, and that's practice. And if you're new, we're not going to get into that right now. That's going to take a lot of practice. And sometimes when you come to a new understanding, when you come to a new, I don't know what to call this, philosophy, a new practice, sometimes you think, well, I don't know if I think it's all suffering. It's not all suffering. There's some good times in my life. And sometimes you kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt sometimes. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. But it's a journey. So we want to look at what can we do now and what are some of the foundations that we have. So when the Buddha first started teaching, the first thing he taught was generosity. Then he taught ethics, and then he taught meditation. If you're new to this, it's actually like the third thing he taught was meditation. And you might have come in thinking, well, I want to learn to meditate. Well, these are things, these things he taught before, all help support the meditation, the mindfulness, and the concentration. And those are going to take some time, but we can look at these and see what are these foundational teachings that are going to support us as we start on the path, or if we've been on the path for a long time, are we living in accordance with these? So the first one is generosity. And this is just the practice of generosity. The Buddha said, no true spiritual life is possible without a generous heart. And this can be, this idea of generosity to me is about letting go. John uses the concept about letting go a lot. You'll hear that in this practice, letting go. And generosity is that first physical. It could be you're giving energy, you're giving attention, you're giving physical, material goods. But this letting go, this opening up, this letting go. So that's the first thing he taught, was practice of generosity. The second, so now that's the first thing. So now the next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to be looking at the first step on the Noble Eightfold Path. And there's going to be two parts to this. Because it's important, it's right view or right understanding. And it's always good to understand how things work a little bit before you get started on doing it. You got to know how to drive the car before you get in. You know a little bit about how it works. You don't know everything about it, you know a little bit about it. And according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, there's like two concepts to this. There's what they call superior right view. And that is an understanding of the Four Noble Truths that I just said. He says that it begins with a conceptual understanding and thought and reflection. And it culminates in a direct intuition of these same truths, this direct lived experience. Okay, I'm going to set that aside right now. I'm not there. I'm working on that. But so we're not going to do anything with that right now. What we're going to look at is the second piece of this, and that is what we call mundane right view or mundane right understanding. And this one is important because that is the law of karma. And that's the law of cause and effect. It's action. It's volitional action. The Buddha said, monks, it is a volition that I call karma or action. Having willed, one performs an action through body, speech, or mind. So this idea of karma, and it's the idea there of volitional action, and this idea of if I act with unwholesome intentions, I'm going to get more pain and suffering for myself and others. If I act out of wholesome intentions, I'm going to have less suffering. I'm not going to produce suffering for myself and others. Now, if you're new to this, you may want to hold that. That's okay. If you've been experiencing this a lot, you may have experienced this in your life. But it is a law, and it's just like gravity. If I throw a rock up and I stand in it, I'm going to hit on the head. So what we want to do is have, what am I going to have to be operating in accordance with? And that's the law of karma. So we're going to keep going down the Noble Eightfold Path. Now we're going to be looking at what Larry talked about last week was right intention or right intention. And there are really three parts to that. And here again, what we're doing here is setting the direction for our practice. And what we're doing in a lot of this is setting the direction for how we live our lives. The first one of this part of intention is, and this is what Larry really talked about, was renunciation. And it's this turning away from this craving. And an easy way to look at this, a simple way of looking at this too, is this idea of immediate gratification, looking for happiness just wherever you can, this non-sustainable. I found this was off the Facebook. This is about Robert Holden, who I really don't know who it is, but I like the way he phrased this idea as a way of looking at renunciation. Beware of destination addiction, a preoccupation with the idea that happiness is in the next place, the next job, and with the next partner. Until you give up the idea that happiness is somewhere else, it will never be where you are. So this is this idea of always this clinging, this looking for something else, attaching to something to this satisfaction, this happiness that's not sustainable. The next piece of intention is goodwill, the practice of goodwill. And this is how can I have more goodwill in my life? And this is through the practice of metta or loving kindness. I can have a more loving kindness person, if you want to phrase it that way, to practice goodwill in my life. And if we think about this, at the end of our meeting tonight, we always do the metta. If I want to be safe, protected, healthy, doesn't it make sense that every other being wants that for themselves? So it makes sense to practice goodwill, loving kindness. And the third piece is harmlessness. And for me, I look at this right now as a way of safety. If you're not going to harm me, I can feel safe around you. And if I'm not going to harm somebody or something else, then that person can feel safe. And one of the ways we do this is through the development of compassion. If I have compassion for people, for other things, I'm not going to harm them, therefore they can feel safe. So that's one of the things that he taught us. How can I be a more compassionate person? Now we're going to get into a little bit more. So those are kind of, we're setting the direction of what we're doing here. The next piece is right speech. And I'm going to give you these all real quickly. We want to abstain from false speech. That's with the intention to deceive. Abstain from slanderous speech. We don't repeat things, or we don't want to cause contention. We want to abstain from harsh speech. Speech that is spoken or uttered in anger with intended to cause pain. And we want to abstain from idle chatter. Now, idle chatter is, we are not monks. We don't live in a monastery. We have to talk. We have interaction with people. So it's okay. We're going to talk with people. That's how we create relationships and do things. However, I want us to kind of back up a little bit. And for me, this thing about right speech it should be relabeled too. It should be called right communication. Because, I don't know how many people post on Facebook, how many people do Twitter, how many people do Instagram, how many people do emails. So we've got to look at our communication. How do we communicate daily other than just right speech? For instance, I have a friend that he can get caught up in TikTok. Well, he can spend 2 hours on TikTok. That's idle chatter. This is, or if you spend a lot of time on these things, this is like idle chatter. Is if you spend a lot of time doing it and go, oh, wait a minute. If you spend hours on Facebook, okay, wait a minute, maybe this is considered idle chatter, not just posting something maybe in anger on Facebook, but also just the time spent. So we want to look at this idea of right communication. How am I communicating in accordance with not being lying or slander speech or being in anger or just spending a lot of time through idle chatter? If you ever go on retreat, you'll find out if you're in noble silence, how much you don't need to talk or how much you go, wow, you got through this whole time without saying anything. So that's the idea about right speech or right communication. The next one is right action. This one's pretty straightforward. They're pretty straightforward now. This is abstain from taking life, abstain from taking what is not given, stealing. That could also be not just stealing something, that could be time or energy or tension. And then abstaining from sexual misconduct. The one on sexual misconduct is he has some rules in there and who you can and can't do that. But the bottom line is causing harm. Or you causing harm not only to yourself, to the other person, but other people tangent to that relationship. So it's just not causing harm. So that's right action. The next one is right livelihood. And this one here again, we're all pretty much good with this one. They said that wealth should be garnered in accordance with certain standards. It has to be legal, peaceful, honest, and does not harm or cause suffering for others. And so most of us probably have that one, could check that one off from that standpoint. So that's right livelihood. So you can see where, so those are some of the foundations. And what I'm going to do is at the end of this is I'm going to set some intentions based on these. But it starts out with generosity. Then you've got to have kind of an understanding, this right understanding about karma and why we're doing this. And then this right intention, setting this direction for my life. And then we get into the right speech and right actions and right livelihood. Then we start putting this together. All this is to help support when you get ready to sit with meditation. It helps to it's going to support your meditation. If you're, like I said, if you're new, you can go ahead and set these intentions now. And you are started on the path. This is a way to get started. This is a way these are foundational teachings of this path. And you can set the intention. And the intention is just kind of putting it out there. If you're new, if you're experienced to this practice, you can take and reflect. Am I living in intention, in accordance with these fundamental teachings? And I like the idea, if you go on retreat too, you have this thing about we undertake the precept too. These are not commandments. We're all working at this. So tonight, I'm going to set my intentions. And you're welcome to join me, or you can reflect upon these. I'm going to set my intention to be a more generous person. I set my intention to be aware of the law of karma, this law of cause and effect, wholesome and unwholesome. I want to set my intention to be aware of this clinging for instant gratification or this destination addiction. I set my intention to practice loving kindness, to practice goodwill. I set my intention to practice compassion, to be a more compassionate person, provide a safe place for others. I set my intention to be aware of what I say and what I communicate, and all those forms of communication. I set my intention to abstain from taking life, from taking what is not as given, and from sexual misconduct. And I'm not going to do the last one, livelihood, because I don't have one. So I'm okay there. But I'm just setting this intention. I'm putting it out there. And then I can come back. And also I can use these as we go on, as the year goes. These are also guideposts to come back to. You can always come back and look at these over time and say, was I more compassionate person? What did I practice generosity? Now, I'm going to fail at a lot of these. Just like a New Year's resolution, we're not always going to do it. But I'm going to have something I can go back to. And the power of intention is really supports me in this also. So I'm going to come back and go, oh, wait a minute, I did something wrong. I said something in anger. That was not right speech. That's okay. Like you miss a day at the gym, it's okay. Go the next week. And then one thing I did, the last thing, I did learn something from our yesterday, the noontime sit, the people there taught me something, is that we set all these intentions out there, and this is, you're on the path, this is setting, we're on the path now, this is setting our intention to be on this path, and it's set direction for our life. You may want to just take one of these and work with it. You know, it can be overwhelming to try to, you know, you have these, but you might want to take one and work one for a month or two. You know, did I, you know, how was my communication for the next month? Was I a more loving person? Kindness for the next time. So it doesn't become too overwhelming. Just like, you know, in either you know, you don't want to overwhelm yourself with a resolution or the intention. You want something that you can work with and something that's practical and sustainable. So those are my intentions for this year. And it also helps me for a little bit of accountability, I think, too, because now all of y'all can come back and ask me. But it is important because these are foundational intentions for our practice. Thank you.